Hi everyone, I'm Heather Poduska, star maker for entrepreneurs who want to unlock their potential, command any stage, and make blockbuster profits. Welcome to Thrive, the show where I bring you tips, resources, and people to help you create a brand that makes you happy and profitable. Here we go. Hi everyone, I'm Heather Poduska, and welcome to this episode of Thrive, how to create a brand story that sells, with my guest, Gail Nowak. Gail Nowak is a marketing and public relations expert who helps entrepreneurs unearth and craft their own compelling brand story so they can make more money in their businesses. In this episode, Gail shares with us her deeply personal story and talks to us about how when she started sharing this story, not only did her business take off, but her entire life transformed for the better. She shares with us how we can use our brand story to get on bigger and better platforms, and she even gives us tips on how we can make a big impact with our story, even if we're just starting out. This is a very, very special and deeply powerful episode of Thrive. Hi everyone, I'm Heather Poduska, and welcome to Thrive, the show where I bring you tips, resources, and people to help you create a brand that makes you happy and profitable. I want to thank you for being here today. You are in for high-value content coming to you from industry leaders who are growing their business, making an impact, and rocking their brands. I am so excited to have my special guest here today, Gail Nowak. Gail is a marketing and public relations consultant who helps purpose-driven entrepreneurs get known and get clients by teaching them how to own and use their story online, in person, and in the media. As a former journalist, she uncovered, and shared the stories of average Janes and Joes in addition to public figures and elite athletes. As an award-winning PR executive, she landed clients in the national spotlight, including The Oprah Show, CBS Evening News, The Today Show, The New York Times, and USA Today, to name just a few. Okay, those are a pretty good few. Earning them millions of dollars in the media coverage that helped grow her clients' products and programs into household names. Since 2013, Gail has helped hundreds of health coaches, financial consultants, trainers, and communicators get their message out in a bigger, more impactful way. Her brilliance is helping her clients understand themselves better, see the value in their story, and get it out to the right people so their message and business grows and makes a difference in the world. As a result of many of her clients have been able to triple their fees, make their competitors irrelevant, attract high-end clients, and most importantly, change lives. Wowie zowie. So thank you so much for being here, Gail. I cannot wait to expose our audience to you and pick your brain.
Thank you for having me, Heather. I'm really excited to be here.
Absolutely. So that's quite a resume. And you and I go way back. We know each other very well, but not everybody in my community knows you yet. So why don't you take just a few minutes and tell people about your amazing story and how you got to be such a rock star marketing, PR, story styling guru?
Yeah. And so my story actually starts in 1998. And it's 1998. I'm a journalist. I'm just fresh out of high school. I'm 24 years old, and I'm fighting for my life. And I'm in the ER, and the white hot lights of the ER are burning my eyes, and I've got this IV in the back of my hand and a tube snaked down my throat, pumping toxins out of my stomach, because hours before, I was writing my goodbyes, and I had downed half a bottle of pills.
Whoa.
Yeah. And I'm 24 years old. I'm overcome with this shame and this guilt and this self-loathing, mostly because when I was 9 years old, my stepfather molested me, and I didn't tell a soul about that for 5 years. And when I finally did get the courage at 14 to tell my mom, she didn't believe me.
Oh, man.
Yeah. So I did the only thing that I knew how to do at the time. They weren't taking it seriously. They weren't looking at it as if it had happened. And so I just kind of followed their lead, and I was determined to bury it and never think about it, never look at it, never talk about it, pretend it never even happened. like it just was going to go away, right?
Wow. Yeah.
But burying it nearly killed me 10 years later.
Wow.
And surviving that night in the year was my wake-up call. And I realized very quickly that dying was not at all what I wanted to happen. I wanted to be understood. I wanted to be loved. I wanted to be seen. I wanted to be heard. And I also had this very clear sense from that experience that I had a lot more work to do. Clearly I had more work to do personally.
Mm-hmm.
But I also had this bigger sense of I have way more work to do in the world.
Mm.
And that really propelled me. And I got the help that I needed. And good things finally started happening for me. I left my job as a journalist. It was a very toxic environment for me. And so as part of my journey, I started weeding out how to get out of these toxic situations. But I knew, even though I wanted to get out of that toxic environment, I knew that I wanted to keep writing. I knew that I wanted to keep telling stories. And so I eventually got a job with an engineering firm in the marketing department, helping them tell their story. And then I later landed a PR job with an advertising and PR agency, helping our clients tell their stories. And so this theme of telling stories, even back in high school, I was the school newspaper managing editor, and I was the editor of the literary magazine. And so this is something that's just kind of been a natural progression of telling stories. But anyway, as I'm honing my craft and developing my skill and my trade, all the while I knew that I wanted to go out and do something on my own. I just didn't know exactly what that was going to be. And in the process, I met my husband. I got married. I bought a home. I had children. And so I was creating this home and this life and this family that I had longed for as a child. And I think that I probably needed to get that foundation set before I could go off and do my own thing and figure out what is that thing anyway, right? Mm-hmm. And so I was feeling, much happier, so much happier in my life. And I was so grateful for these blessings. And if you've been in that place where you hit rock bottom, you tend not to take advantage of those blessings. You don't take those things that are just there for granted as much. You really cherish them. So I did, and I do, and I still, despite that, I still kind of had that nagging happening, and I still felt like I wasn't quite on course. And internally, I was struggling with that, and I was really restless, and I was like, this is not quite right. This is not, I know that I'm good at this. I know I'm a good writer. I know I'm a good communicator, but something's off. And so that calling of you need to go out and do something on your own kept getting louder and louder and louder. And one day I get this email at work about the power of story in business. And it was like, ding, light bulb. And I realized, oh my gosh, I have been doing this my entire life. I have been telling stories, and I never thought of myself as a storyteller. I never called myself that. I never made those two connections. And that's exactly what I had been doing, even in high school and all through my entire career. And that voice got really clear in that moment, and I realized, wow, I need to go out and do this on my own. I need to go out and do this so that it matters. And I need to work with people who I feel like have a message that really matters and can go out and impact and grow people. And that was the piece that was missing. We were working with, when I was at the PR agency, we were working with big corporations and government agencies, and there were a lot of layers and there was a lot of bureaucracy. And it was just like, oh God, does any of this ever matter? And so that was the missing piece for me. It wasn't so much like I'm going to totally reinvent myself. It was, I just need to take what I do and what I'm apparently born to do, and plug it in to something that has meaning for me.
Yeah, I
And
love that. I love that. You know, and
yeah,
I think that's a place that a lot of people get stuck is they have this talent, they have a life of experience, and they know they're good at what they do, but they don't know how to translate that into their business and a business that's fulfilling anyway. So go on. So
yeah,
we'll come back to that.
yeah. And I think that the meaning piece for me was really about my own experience and trying to make meaning out of that, and trying to understand that, and trying to understand, myself and the other people involved in that experience. And so I took a deep breath. I mean, I had been brewing on this since the birth of my first daughter, which she was born in 2008, but I didn't actually pull the trigger until 2013 after I had my second daughter. And I just, it got to that point where I just couldn't stand it anymore. I couldn't stand not to do it anymore. And so I took a deep breath. I quit my job. And interestingly enough, I didn't really know it at the time, but a month before I gave my notice, my stepfather died. Mm. So, all of this stuff is starting to bubble up. And then I go and I do this really scary thing, right? And I quit my secure job, and I've got 2 little kids at home, and I start the Story Stylist, and I start down this path helping other people get their stories out. But I still hadn't come to grips with telling my story. And interestingly enough, my stepfather dies. I start this business. I'm helping people with their story, but I'm not telling mine. And I knew, even back then, I knew, I tried on some other stories. But deep down I knew, like, oh God, this is the freaking story that I'm going to have to tell. And it was 2 years of resistance around that story. And it was affecting my business because all the while I'm attracting women who are like me, who have been through things, who have been through, loss or trauma, and they have these incredible, powerful, deeply personal stories, and they're creating these businesses out of that experience. And I know that I can relate to them, but they don't know how much I can relate to them because I'm not telling them. And so I'm out of integrity, and I'm out of alignment. And, there's just this friction. And so I was really struggling. I was really struggling in my business. I was so frustrated because I wasn't, the money was coming, but it was not coming in a consistent way. And I was like, what am I doing wrong? I'm a smart person. I'm a successful person. What is it that is wrong? And it was this freaking story. And you and I have worked together on this. And part of the big resistance around that was that I just didn't want people to feel bad for me. And that was the thing that was really hanging me up. And interestingly enough, the thing that was hanging up a lot of my clients. So I knew exactly what they were going through. But I hadn't gotten there myself.
So what happened? So let's take that story the next step. So what happened? Did you start, obviously you told your story at the beginning today. So, yeah. And I don't think this is the first time you've told it. So what happened when you made that realization that I'm out of integrity, my story's not really out there, my clients don't know just how well I can serve them and get their message out. So what happened?
Yeah, I recognized that I thought back in 98, in the 90s, whatever, I went to therapy, I got help. I thought everything was kosher. And then these events happened and brought it all up like it was yesterday. And so I knew that I needed to get help, but because of my journey in the coaching world, I also had this whole new set of support available to me that I may not have sought out when I was younger because I just wasn't aware.
Right.
And so I definitely called in support. I leaned on you as my business coach. I leaned on my spiritual advisor, Cynthia Carrere, who is just amazing. And started working through some of these things. And it finally got to a point where I had a month where I made only $14 in sales. And I was just like, you know what? I am just so sick of this.
Mm-hmm.
I am so sick of the frustration, and I know what's going on here, and I know I just got to get this thing figured out. So let's just get it done and get it figured out. And, I worked with you, I worked with Cynthia, and I finally realized it's gonna click once you get the courage to go and tell this story. And so the next month, when I finally, I was scared to death. I was totally felt like I was going to throw up the whole time.
Mm-hmm.
But I started with baby steps, and I sent out an email just to my community and revealed the story, and seriously wanted to vomit every time I thought about it.
Mm-hmm.
But in doing that, so here's the month that I made $14. Here's the month that I sent out that email, and I landed $7,800 in sales.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I know, for some people, $7,800 is like, oh, whatever, that's not a big deal. But for me, it was a big deal to go from $14 to $7,800
with one email. When you aligned yourself with your story and your authenticity and grabbed yourself by the you-know-whats and put, you know what I mean? And had the courage to do that, your audience responded. And I think that so many people are operating at 80%, right? They're out there, they're running their business, they've got a persona, they've got their brand. I loved what you said, Gail. I loved what you said, because you said, I had sort of told my story and I was helping these other people, but I wasn't really living the truth by sharing my story. And I'm not saying that everybody has to tell every personal detail of their life, but you're a story stylist, right? So it's it's very relevant to your business and what you do. And so now talk to us. You've had this $7,800 month. What else happened to you as a result of telling your story?
It totally, embracing it and telling it, it changed my life. So here's the interesting thing. There had been people, friends and people that I had confided in about this along the way, and people who were there, that night that I tried to commit suicide. So it wasn't like it was a total secret. But I hadn't even told my husband.
Wow.
So here I am in this, and I love my husband. I adore my husband. We have a great marriage. Not to say that it's always easy. And that was always a really important thing for me to make sure that I was in a good, healthy, solid relationship, because I didn't have models of that in my childhood. And that was just a driving thing for me. And here I am holding, he doesn't know. Wow. He knows things are off because he's seen the interactions with my family, but he didn't know the whole story. And so I couldn't tell that story to my community, my business community, until I told it to him.
Wow.
And that really opened up our relationship and our marriage. And it's kind of hard to put it into words, but it changed the dynamic with my children.
Sure, of course.
I don't know. It just happened. I don't even have examples of how it just. I just felt more centered. I felt like I felt whole again.
Wow. What else is there? Come on. Yeah. What else is there? Right. And when I was just thinking about what you said earlier about worrying that people would feel sorry for you or feel badly for you. But you know what? No one has to feel bad for you when you take ownership of your story, because then you have the power. Power to you, right? It's your personal power. You take yourself back, right? You're whole again.
Right.
You took ownership and claimed your personal power and didn't let your story and other people's story stop you from living authentically, which then opened up the floodgates in your marriage, with your kids, and in your business. So come on, what else is there? That's amazing.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's amazing.
Exactly.
So what would you, so now you've got your story out, you're telling it, and I'm sure that it's, you and I have talked about this before, that it's, it's not easy. As time goes on, it gets easier and easier to tell your story. What would you say to the person out there who has a deep story, like your story? Maybe it's maybe not the exact same story, but they have a story like that, and they know they're not living an authentic life, and most importantly, that is stopping them from going where they want to go.
Yeah, I mean, I would say you first have to get it out for yourself, like just do it for yourself first.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm kind of a baby steps kind of person. I know there's some people who are like, I'm jumping off the cliff with it. And more power to you if that's the kind of person you are.
Mm-hmm.
But get it out for yourself and tell the story. I mean, say it out loud. Don't just write it down. Say it out loud so that you hear your own voice and you hear the words. And it's hard that first time. It is hard to actually verbalize it and hear it that first time.
Can I ask you a question about that? Because I wrenched my neck lifting some heavy weights a couple months ago, and I've had this sore neck for a long time. Mm-hmm. And I've been having some body work done on my neck so that I can get back to the gym, blah, blah, blah. But, as the guy is like literally on the table with his elbow in my shoulder, and I'm starting to kind of get weepy because A, it kills, but B, it's just something was holding there. So talk to me a little bit about what your story does when you hold it to your being, right? Not just to your pocketbook, but to your being.
Yeah. So, okay. So that's a really great question. Because I had been I'm a pretty healthy person. Mm-hmm. And it's so fascinating to me because in 2013, when I started my business, when my stepfather died, when I'm going through all these transitions, I threw out my back. I mean, I wasn't doing anything. I just woke up one day and I was in excruciating back pain for 2 months.
Wow.
I mean, I literally could not move. And I don't know why I waited so long to go to physical therapy and get help, but whatever. I thought I was going to just power through it, right? Mm. So that was weird. Also, I had this. I went to the eye doctor, and I get migraines sometimes, and so I, like, literally, it was a week after my stepdad's funeral. I'm in my office at home, and I get kind of like this vision thing. So with my migraines, I get I forgot what they call it, but the auras or whatever. Mm-hmm. So I know one's coming. And so that's what I thought it was, but it stayed there. Mm. So I did, my whole migraine routine, and it stayed there for days. So I go to the eye doctor and I'm like, yeah, I had this migraine and it's not going away. And I've got like this it was like a little pinprick that I was seeing in my eye. And she looks at it and she says, you have a cotton wool spot. Right. I'm like,
whatever that is.
I've never heard of this before. Well, apparently cotton wool spot is indicative of some sort of systemic problem in your body, diabetes or stroke or high blood pressure. So it's a really serious thing. And I was like, what? Mm-hmm. What? So I had to go to Mass Eye and Ear, and they looked at it. And they were like, yep, that's what it is. But they just kind of left me hanging there about it. And so I had to do all these tests and to check for all these different autoimmune things. And everything came up clear. There was nothing wrong with me. Mm. But apparently you don't just get these. So
Right. There was a systemic problem, right? There was a systemic
problem. Physically, there was nothing wrong with me. But it was this stuff that I was holding on to was like, it's time to let us out. It was manifesting physically. And you and I've had discussions about, how do you react to things physically in your body? And that's how I was reacting to it.
So now how do you feel physically now that you've gotten your story out?
Well, okay. I'll be completely transparent.
Besides nauseous.
This is also interesting to me because I've been telling the story a lot more lately. But I have been noticing I've been having throat issues. I've scratchy throat. I've been coughing a lot. And I can't help but wonder, like, is that just more of just getting it out?
Right. So what would you tell someone, that has a story like yours? What would you tell them about telling their story? Because obviously, you would, I don't know what the percentage is or the times number is going from 14 to 7,800, whatever that leap is.
Yeah.
But it's huge, right? And it was from one email of telling your story. And I know you've done things since then that have generated income by telling your story, by speaking and really getting your here and, really spreading the news about it. But someone who is unsure about telling their story, what would you say to them about the value of getting your story out?
So it's one thing to tell somebody you've got to tell it. Like they have to come to it on their own. And so what I like to do for my clients is give them that safe space to start speaking it. So first it's, listen to yourself, say it for yourself, get used to hearing it, get used to your voice, get used to what comes up for you in the telling of it. And then go out and start sharing it with people that people that you're close to. If you're working with me, I'm going to be the first person that's going to listen to you with your story.
Well, it is so important. I mean, and knowing your story is you getting your story out is so important for your clients to know that you get it, right? To have that ear to get it.
And I think, and the other thing too is helping my clients understand that yes, it's your story and it's very deeply personal, but it's not about you. It's about it's about how you're going to impact others with that story. You're not. Yes, okay, you can use your story in your business. It's an incredible business asset, and it is going to help you get your message out and help you grow your business, help you grow personally. But really, the whole point is to go out there and tell a story that's going to have an impact on other people. I mean, as purpose-driven entrepreneurs, that's what we do. That's what we're always saying. I want to make a difference. I want to change the world. I want to make an impact. You do that through telling your story.
Yeah. Gail, we have someone who wants to join the conversation. Would you be open to
Sure.
taking a question?
Hi, everyone. I hope you're enjoying the show. There's still more great content to come, but I wanted to take just a minute to talk to you about a new course I've created called Close Any Room. You may have noticed that all of my guests know how to speak about their businesses in a clear and compelling way. But that's something a lot of entrepreneurs struggle with, and it's something you need to know how to do so you can convert your audience into more sales. And that's why I've created this course. It's a 6-week audio course to teach you how to craft a signature talk so that you can authentically give value and close more of your audience from the stage. In the class, you learn how to create a clear and compelling point of view, how to organize your content and give great value to your audience without giving away the farm, how to structure your talk so that it seamlessly closes your audience at the end without feeling salesy. And I also give you templates and instructions how to create marketing materials, a speaker sheet, and all kinds of sign-up sheets when you're giving your talks. And finally, what everybody's hot to know, I also give you tips and resources on how to find speaking gigs. It's an all-inclusive course so that you can start closing and selling more from the stage. And as my free gift to you for tuning into the podcast, I'm giving you my free webinar, also called Close Any Room. And you can listen to it at clearvoicebranding.com/close-any-room. And it will give you lots of tips and information to get you started on how to create that signature talk that sells. Okay, we're going to get back to the show now. There's still more great content to come. Thanks for joining me.
Okay, Brianna, I'm going to let you in. You have a question. You can shoot it out. Oh, wait a minute. Wait. Yes. Okay. All right. That was a poor internet signal. But later on, if someone has a specific question for Gail, then we can shoot that out there. But to get your story out to people that you impact. So I know that you have a story also about a talk that you've given recently, right? And you told your story and you made sales from giving your talk. And even though it was scary, people responded to you. So it was a business thing. It was a huge success for you in terms of having that brave step, right, to go do that. But I know that there's something that happened as a result of that. So tell our audience what happened as a result of you being brave and telling your story and making money from it.
And before I go in there, I just want to touch on a few common misperceptions that people have around their stories that is relevant to kind of the discussion that we were talking about. Is we're telling ourselves our own stories about our story. And a lot of times people think, well, I don't have a story, or my story's not all that interesting. And oh, by the way, like that was totally me. Like I had such a normal life. Like that was the thing that I was telling myself. Oh, I don't have a story, or that people they don't care about your story, or some people have so many stories and they just don't know which one to tell.
I think that's a big one.
Yeah. And just to kind of quickly go through those points, everyone has a story, and it doesn't have to be as intense as the story that I told. I know a lot of people who use humor in their stories to, really impact their audiences, and that works very well. As far as people not caring about your story, you just have to know how to make it relevant for your audience. And then that whole business about, I have so many stories, I don't know which one to tell. It's really, you have to be clear about what your message is, who your audience is, why you want to tell the story, and what you want your audience to know and learn and do as a result of that story. So all of those things can be overcome. But yeah, going back to what you were saying, it's not just about the business impact, or at least it's not for me, because I was at this event, I gave my talk, I told my story, and I really, really didn't want to tell my story. But I went out and I told it anyway. And afterward, a woman came up to me. She didn't buy anything, but she came up to me. She had a very specific question for me. She's a motivational speaker. She goes out and she talks to teens. She's also an author. She wrote a book about how to be happy. And she asked me, listening to your story, I'm thinking that maybe I need to tell my coming out story in my talk. And she said, but I don't know how that's really relevant to my topic and to my audience. And so we kind of just brainstormed on that for a few minutes. And honestly, Heather, I don't even remember exactly what I said to her. It was from God's hand out of my mouth. But we figured it out very quickly. And the next day she was going to do a talk with seventh graders. So after the event over the weekend, I emailed her and I said, so did you end up telling the story? And she wrote back and she said, yeah, I told my story and it went really well. And, I had a bunch of people sign up. And hopefully I'm going to get some more speaking gigs out of this. And then she said, it was so funny. There was a 7th grade boy there who was completely enamored with me and followed me around the whole day. And he told me that he didn't even like gays, but he loved me. And I was just I had chills. Goosebumps. And that is why you go and tell your story, because you never know I never would have thought like my story to her story to changing the worldview of the seventh grader and changing his heart and changing his mind and how that might impact some other kid that maybe he would have bullied had he had
That's
not
amazing.
experienced her story, had she had not experienced my story. And so that, I mean, that's the thing that really gets me jazzed up and excited and why I tell my clients, you have to remember it's not for you.
Right. So let's just take that a step further now. So you've had this great experience where you've told your story. It, had this ripple effect of this other person being more authentic in their storytelling and then ultimately changing potentially the life of this kid who, is going to have a completely different perspective about gay life and how he feels about homosexual people and blah, blah, blah.
Right.
That's one person, one story, one ripple effect. But you also help people get their story out on bigger platforms. Let's face it, you've had clients on the, you've got clients on the Oprah show, in the New York Times, on the Today Show. How does somebody get their story out there? Like what quality does their story have to have? What channels do they have to go through? Talk to us a little bit about getting your story out on the bigger platforms so you can impact even more lives.
Yeah. You absolutely have to position your story for impact and for profit, right? So it's, it's not a thing that you're just going to tell once and then stick in your back pocket. You're going to tell it everywhere. You're going to tell it anytime you have an opportunity to talk about your business. And when you know the bigger story, you can take that story and condense it and slice it and dice it for the different platforms that you're speaking on. So, we're doing an interview. You might have the opportunity to tell the longer story, or if you're doing a talk, you can tell the full story. If you're talking to the media, your whole interview is probably going to be like 2 minutes max. So you need to be able to figure out what's the headline of my story,
What's the head? That's awesome. So how do you figure out what the headline of your story actually is?
Yeah. I know somebody who has a story about how she's using speaking and how speaking was the thing that got her to 6 figures in 12 months. So literally the result. I did this and this resulted. And that's the headline of your story.
What if you don't have a big result yet? What if you have a story, you're growing, and you don't have the 6 figures or the 7 figures yet, but you're on your way and you're telling your story? Then what would the headline be?
Then the headline is about your mission. Like you want to get people fired up about the thing that you're doing.
Okay.
So it's really, you're leaning a little bit more heavily on your messaging in that sense, but you're also letting people know how you're going to go about doing that.
And don't you also think that the result doesn't necessarily have to be about your own result, but the potential result of your clients, right?
Right.
So if I'm helping somebody with their message and their platform and their image, and then they go out and score a $20,000 speaking gig, and if I'm somebody who hasn't hit 7 figures yet, then I can still talk about this process that helps these clients get this result.
Exactly. And especially in the media, I mean, they would much rather hear about how you've helped your clients or helped somebody else. They're actually more interested in that story.
Well, that goes back to what you were saying about your story isn't about you anyway. Right. So it's about how your story can help someone else. Right. Awesome. So I know that you also do story styling. So you help people write their stories. Yes.
Kind of.
Okay. Talk to us a little bit about that.
I like my clients to write their own story, but what I help with is getting that story out. So as a journalist, I am really good at asking probing questions and also hearing things that maybe the person that I'm working with, the client that I'm working with, wouldn't hear in the way that I hear it, and being willing to explore that path with them. And that will pull out amazing things. And I have had so many clients say, oh my gosh, I never connected those dots. And so what I do is really help them first get it out help them connect the dots, help them structure it
Mm-hmm.
so that they are pretty much 80% of the way there when it's time for them to actually put it down on paper and
Yep.
write it for themselves. And the reason why I want people to write it for themselves is because it's their story,
Right.
and I want it to be in their voice, not my voice.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally get that. So, say you have a story, fantastic. Everybody has a fantastic story because it's their story, right? Is there a difference between, from your professional PR opinion, is there a difference in the way that you tell your story or approach different platforms to get your story out there? So, say you're going for media like, Super Soul Sunday with Oprah versus the New York Times. Is there a different way to approach pitching your story?
Yeah, I mean, yes and no. The process that I go through with my clients, I'm always saying you have to think about you have to know who your audience is.
Right.
And that's where it all begins. So in that sense, the steps are the same, but the approach might be different for that particular audience. So, Oprah's going to have you on her couch, or it's going to be intimate. It's going to be really a dialogue and a conversation, right? I mean, it's going to be a little bit gritty and very personal.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas the New York Times, this is probably going to be somebody who's picking up the phone. It's got a million things going on, a noisy newsroom in the background. You need to be able to bang, 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 bang. Get it out. Be concise. Get to the point. Don't screw around. You have to.
So when you're approaching those different platforms, say you're not on the Oprah show yet, you haven't been booked yet, you're not in the New York Times yet, but you are approaching those platforms. Do you approach them with those different styles? So do you approach the New York Times desk and say, these are my bullet points, these are my sound bites, this is my story, blah, blah, blah. And then do you approach the Oprah team with more of a soft sell, a more of an intimate approach? So what's your feeling about that?
Yeah, I mean, when you're approaching the media, you really need to get to the point quickly. It may not even be your story in the sense of the story that I told today and what we've been talking about. You need to basically answer before the media asks you, why this? Why am I pitching them this? Like, why is it relevant to them and their audience? Why now? So what is the urgency around it? And why me? And that's kind of where your story comes into it, or maybe your client's story comes into it. So you need to be able to package that in a very succinct way. And actually, it doesn't necessarily change. The approach doesn't necessarily change from the New York Times or Oprah.
Okay.
Because having been on the behind the scenes with Oprah and having a client go through that process, she was fortunate enough to have had some visibility and had a platform already and had a book and everything. And she was like this world-renowned psychologist. So Oprah's people knew about her.
Mm-hmm.
But she still had to have a conversation with the producer, and she still had to be concise. She still had to have her talking points down. She had to be ready to send that book at a moment's notice. Mm-hmm. So it is much more fast paced, and you need to be positioned and packaged before you even go and approach the media in that way.
That's right. That's right. I absolutely agree with that. I mean, my catchphrase that I say all the time is, you can't get ready. You have to be ready. You have to know exactly what your point of view is, what your story is. You need to look, sound the part that you are presenting to the people. You need to know what your value proposition is, so that when opportunity knocks, you can answer that call and walk through that door. You don't get ready. You are ready when that opportunity comes up, and you prepare for that opportunity ahead of time, and you're strategic about it. So let's talk about strategy a little bit for people who maybe are not world-renowned psychologists, already have their books already going, but maybe they're the step right before that they're building platform, they're building visibility, and they want to use their story so that when and if they get the chance, they can I should say it differently, so that they can draw the attention of people like
Darren Hardy or the Huffington Post or whoever it is that they want the attention from. So how do they build platform with their story before that national level?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really a matter of being clear. You first have to be clear about who your audience is, and then from a media standpoint, it's targeting the right media. So you may think, yeah, I totally want to be in the Wall Street Journal or the New York Times or on Oprah or in the Huffington Post. And that's great from a brand awareness standpoint. And if that's your goal, then by all means approach those outlets. However, if you're looking to generate leads, generate sales, and really sort of build your practice, those outlets are so broad, they might not have those kind of tangible results. So it all depends on what your goal is. If your goal is just, I got to get my name out there, I got to build brand awareness, I have to, shoot for the stars when it comes to the media, that's one thing. But if you're out there, if that's part of it, and you also want it to pay off, you need to be very targeted. So you brought up Success Magazine. I mean, Success is a big outlet, but if you're an entrepreneur, and particularly a purpose-driven entrepreneur, and you're at a certain level and have an established platform, Success might be a little bit of a reach for you, but that might be the perfect place to reach for because entrepreneurs are reading that magazine.
Right. So, and then you bring up another point too, is just because you are in the media does not mean it's going to translate into dollars, that you have to understand what the back end is of that opportunity, right? You can position yourself and have the greatest story in the world. And I know a lot of people have been on those shows or those platforms who were not ready for the influx of attention and audience, and then scrambled and lost out on a lot of money because they hadn't really, again, prepared for the opportunity.
Right.
So I have another question about story. Now you told us your story, and everybody has their own story. What would you say to people about story and being too personal? What is your opinion? Your story is very personal, and it's relevant to your business. But what would you say to people about that piece of it?
Yeah, I mean, so there's a couple of things happening with that. You have to get personal. You absolutely have to get personal. On the flip side, you do not have to tell every single detail.
What do you mean you have to get personal, and why do you have to get personal?
So you have to get, it's really important to talk about your expertise, right? I mean, people do want to know that you're credible, that you can get results for them. And there's a lot of women out there who are actually shy about that. And I don't want to toot my own horn. You've got to do that. But you have to go beyond that too, because people want to know that you're human. And getting personal really is the quickest way to build trust with another person. Getting intimate, that's how you build trust.
Do you think that it's easier for women to be intimate and with their story than men? Or have you not noticed a trend? Because we're blabbers. I mean, right?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think I've worked mostly with women. Mm-hmm. So I've kind of only experienced behind the closed doors with women. Mm-hmm. And so I do see that there are those concerns, like I don't want people to feel bad for me, or there's just so much here. How do I narrow it down to just the really important pieces that need to be there? And my experiences with men, I think that they're a little bit more courageous in the telling of it.
Oh, that's so interesting. Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
say more about that.
Yeah. So I had this experience, and granted, this person, I don't know how long they have been telling this story. So it could have just been that there was time and distance, but so fascinating to me. And this is before I was telling my story. I met him as part of another group that I'm involved with, and we were going to an event, and there was this dinner that a bunch of us just decided to go to and meet each other and face to face. And he was very outgoing. He's a life coach, and he was very outgoing about how he had previously built this $1 million company, lost it all, was suicidal.
Mm-hmm.
And he was telling everybody that story. And when he came to me and told me that story, so here's the thing that happens, right? So that's a trigger for me because that's my experience. I lean over, I'm talking about intimacy, right? And verbal intimacy. But he tells me that, and I lean closer to him and I say, I had a similar experience too.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then we're talking about that. So I felt safe talking to him, even though I had just met this guy. I don't know who this person is. So, but I was completely, I was impressed, and I admired him for just coming, this is just who I am. This is just what I experienced.
So you think if a man takes ownership of his story, then he's sort of bolder about telling it? I mean, this is a huge generalization. I know that, but
it is. And this is just one example. I mean, I do think that there are plenty of women out there who are very open and very bold.
I think the question was coming from, I think that sometimes men, they have a harder time. They don't want to be seen as soft, right? So that and I think it's a disservice to them because telling your story, like you said, makes people lean in. And the other thing I want to point out about what you said, and we talked about suicide and people who have that story, that's a really deep and personal story. And it may not be for everybody. He might have told that story and someone have been like, thank you, I'm going to go talk to this person on the other side of the room. And that's the point of having your audience and knowing your audience, because not everybody's going to resonate with your story. And some people might think, oh my God, she is way too vulnerable. This is making me uncomfortable. And other people are going to be like, oh man, I need to talk to her because she gets it and she knows exactly how to help me. So the more you can tell your story, the more you're going to magnetize your audience to you. And not everybody's going to be your audience.
Right. Exactly. And I think that maybe that's where the answer is, Heather, because I think men, and again, probably a generalization, and I don't mean to offend, but I think men have more of a, I don't really give a damn what people think of me kind of approach. Whereas as women, that's a really scary thing, I think, for a lot of women. We do care. Sometimes we care most about how are other people feeling about us.
Mm-hmm. Oh, and we tend to be tuned into other people's emotions a little bit.
Exactly.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Exactly. And so we take that on. So yeah, I mean, I think breaking through that barrier, that's where the liberation comes from.
So give us a tip. How can I, as a person who has a story that I'm nervous about, I'll give you a really personal example. So I'm a singer, and I studied my whole life to be an opera singer, and I went to the New England Conservatory. I studied in Italy. I went to Germany. I mean, I've done all these things, and in my mind, I never had the career that I wanted, and it was because my technique wasn't solid enough. And I talked earlier in the blab about my shoulder being tense, and I really have had issues with tension in my body, which does not make for an open instrument, right? And it's something, but over time, I've had a lot of shame around that, that I have this instrument, that I know it's a good instrument. And now I've worked through a lot of that, and I sing much more freely now. So it's not as poignant for me as I tell the story. But in those moments, right, when I'm feeling ashamed and I'm looking at my colleagues who are going on to the Met, and I'm singing in the professional chorus of a regional opera house, like that shame that comes up. So give us a tip. How do we go through that first, I don't want to tell that shame piece? What's the first step?
Yeah. I mean, I think the first step is realizing that you're human, right?
Oh, that's not
but I know it sounds simple, but I mean, that really, in my process, through my journey, it really was just understanding that, like, this is not I am not unique in this experience. Like, there's nothing special about me that means I am the only one going through this experience. And in fact, with the knowledge of, so you brought up shame, right?
Yeah.
So your story is very different than my story, and yet the universal theme in both of our stories is shame.
Yeah. Right.
And that's having that awareness of the universal theme in your story, and that's the point where people connect with you, even if the details are completely different or really intense and really personal for you, but maybe not so much for them, or maybe they are, right? I mean, who's to say that your feelings were any less intense than mine just because the details are different?
Right.
It's understanding that everybody's got one of these.
That is an awesome tip, right? I love that. And also, I think the other thing that you shared earlier could be very helpful as well, is that by sharing your story, A, you're liberating yourself, B, you're liberating someone else to tell their story, and C, you have no idea how you're going to impact somebody with what you do.
Right.
You know, and to go back to my singing analogy, I sang, when I was in college, I sang a vocal competition. I think there were like, 300 or 500 people in the audience, and I sang, and, I didn't think much of it. I got third place or something like that, and I didn't think much of it. And I saw a woman who was much older than I was, maybe like 5 weeks later, and she said, "Oh, you were in that singing competition." She said, "I recorded that competition, and I play your aria all the time because it just makes me feel so good." And I'm like, I'm like 22 and I'm worried about nailing my high note. And here this woman is telling me that she's listening to the recording. And
Right.
So having that awareness as well, I think is part of what can help someone break through of that juggernaut.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I think also keeping in mind that I think with women in particular, there's this concern of, am I manipulating people? Am I tricking them into doing something? Because I think also a lot of us we struggle around what our worth and our value really is. And that actually does start to become clear as you start to own and share your story. You start to become much more centered in that. But you also need to understand that the story isn't about tricking people. It's about not letting them off the hook. It's about, because it's really easy to sit in an audience, right? And to see somebody up on a stage and to think, oh, this person's got it all together, right? Because you're only seeing the tip of the iceberg.
Right.
And when they go and tell you, oh, you're seeing the tip of the iceberg right now, but guess what? It was a shit show not that long ago, or 10 years ago or 20 years ago. That's a sign to them that, oh, I can't just say, oh, your situation is different or my situation is different. So it turns that it won't work for me into, oh, if she has gone through that, if she could overcome that, and here she is now, so can I.
I love that because it's two-sided. It's, if she can do it, if she has done it, I have no excuse. And also, if she can do it, so can I, right?
Yeah.
So I love that. So tell us, we're sort of coming to the end of the time. So give us one tip to help people, that first step to start creating their captivating story.
Yeah. So, I mean, it starts with your message. It really does. You have to be, and even before starting with your message, it starts with being clear on who your audience is. But you have to have a magnetic message, and it has to be. When I say magnetic message, what I mean by that is it has to reflect the journey that your audience is on, and so that's why it's important to know the audience. But it also has to come from your own heart and values. So there's a combination of things going on there. And then the other thing too is that it has to be relevant, and it has to. You have to be able to express your point of view. And I know, you're right on board with this.
Right.
You have to be able to show people kind of what your big vision is, but then your angle on that big vision.
Right.
And then finally, it has to inspire action.
Right.
So with that, when you have that magnetic message, that's gonna draw people to you. I mean, we know, right? We get hundreds of email every day. We see 5,000 marketing messages every day. We're bombarded with 250 ads every day. It's a crowded and noisy marketplace.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't have something that's going to slice through that, your audience isn't even going to know that you exist.
Right. You know,
So-
one of my favorite catchphrases is that you don't get paid to sing in the shower. You know, everybody's free and loose in the shower, literally, right? I mean, and you're singing and you don't care if you make a mistake. You don't care if you're flat. And you usually sound glorious in the shower because you're letting it all out, right?
Right.
And it's the same with your story, your marketing message. You have to be willing to get that story out there in the most authentic way. Because
Right.
that is part of what is going to cut through the noise. And then also then amping it up, right? I mean, whether you're an opera singer using your resonating chambers or you're using a microphone, you have to amp up that message to reach your audience as well.
Exactly. And the other piece about having that message nailed down is it makes it so much easier to figure out what's the story that goes with this message.
Perfect. So
what I tell people is you start the message. So when you deliver your story, your message is actually toward the end, but you have to start with the end in mind in order to craft the story.
I love that. So start with the end in mind, start with the message in mind, but reverse engineer the story from the message. Love
Exactly.
that. So Gail, if someone wants to know more about how to work with you, to work on their story or to know about, you know, how to use their story to get in the national media, how do they get in touch with you? How can they work with you?
So they can go to my website, thestorystylist.com. It's thestorystylist, all one word, .com. And actually, Heather, if it's okay, I have a little gift for your audience today that I'd love to share. It's what I call my Story Power Pack. And in that Story Power Pack is it's what I call my $1 million story checklist. So it just kind of goes through, you know, my system, the steps in my system, and it comes with a 5-day e-course to really help you break down some of those steps and get a jump start on your story.
That's awesome. So where can they get that?
So your audience can get that at thestorystylist.com/story power pack, and story power pack is all one word too.
Cool. I love it. Okay. So we're coming to the end. I have 2 questions left for you. So I help entrepreneurs become speaking stars from the stage, right? They command their presence. They look the part, they look, act, and sound like $1 million so they can convert more people from the stage, whether it's, you know, lovely interview like this or live. What do you think it takes to be a brand star?
Courage. I think it takes courage. Knowing yourself, and knowing, I know it's going to sound probably simple and maybe even a corny, but knowing what your strengths are and really leaning into those strengths and getting support in the places where I'm not necessarily saying shore up your weaknesses, because sometimes you can just cut them loose. But
just like a bad boyfriend, just cut them loose.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, so for example, let me use concrete examples to get this out. So I really shine in the writing of things, right? I know that that's a strength of mine. I shine in telling stories. Speaking, I'm working on it, right? And I know that if I want to advance my business, advance my brand, build my platform, this is something that I need to work on. And so knowing, and it's important, right? Do I need to work on knowing how to, create a website? No.
Right.
That's not, it's important to my brand, but I don't have to be the one to figure that out.
Right.
I do need to work on some of those pieces where I am the face of my business that maybe I don't have a whole lot of practice on. You know, sales, I've been in marketing for 20 years. Sales is a relatively new thing for me. So I know I need to
right,
get
and
support. So
sometimes-
part of it is knowing what are your strengths, and then what are those pieces where you're going to have to pull in experts to
Right.
help you polish those skills.
Right. Yeah. And I agree. And that's one of the things that I help clients do is to help them figure out what that zone of genius is, because as we're full circle now, a lot of people are operating at 80%. They're close, but they're not really leaning into that zone of genius. And once you do, things start to really fly. And like you said, you're brilliant at telling and extracting and promoting stories. And once you started leaning into that in your own business, things started to fall into place.
Right.
So, and you are a brand star and you are a rising star. So I cannot wait to see what comes for you. So last question. In this moment, as you're sitting in your chair, what are you most grateful for?
What am I most grateful for? So I actually have this little, my mother-in-law, she's so sweet. She puts together, every Christmas, she puts together these family calendars.
Mm-hmm.
And because of the technical world that we live in, I no longer print photos. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to pull this off my file cabinet over here and use this picture because I don't actually have a regular printout. I don't know if you can see this. Can you see this?
Yes, I can.
So this is my family.
Yeah.
This is my husband down here. This is Natasha. This is Hazel. Obviously, that's me in the background. We're up on Lake Ossipee in New Hampshire. And like I said, kind of hitting that rock bottom really helps me be grateful for the simple things, to not take advantage, I shouldn't say take advantage, but not take for granted all the blessings that I have. I always I wanted to have a happy, healthy relationship and a beautiful family, and I have that.
That's beautiful. Wow. Well, I am grateful for you. I'm grateful for the time that you took to share with us and your expertise. And most of all, I'm grateful for your courage and your bravery and your commitment to yourself to get your story out, to be brave in telling your story, to help other people tell their stories, to alleviate some of the pain in the world and inspire millions of people through you, through your clients, through your story and through their stories, and how you've touched me and the lives of our audience that's here now and that's going to be listening to this podcast. So thank you so much. I'm grateful for you, Gail. And I'm grateful for all of you for being here as well. And my gift for you for staying on is also a free course. It's Close Any Room, where I teach you how to be a great speaker and sell from the stage. You can get that at clearvoicebranding.com/close-any-room. So thank you guys all so much for being here. Until next time, here's to hitting all your high notes. Take care. Bye-bye. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me for this episode of Thrive. I loved having you here. I love having you as part of my community. And if you're enjoying the show, I would love it if you share it with your friends on Twitter, on Facebook, or wherever they're hanging out. I also want to let you know you can leave me feedback or comments. I love hearing from you. Just post those at heatherpoduska.com. You can also leave suggestions for topics that you'd like to know more about, or if there's someone you'd really like to see on the show, let me know that as well. Okay, until next time, here's to hitting all your high notes. Take care. Bye-bye.